Imagine a small town forgotten on the map, a place where time seems to stand still, where the main road, wide and deserted, is flanked by dark forests and houses that slowly crumble under the weight of decades. This town, called Pine Hollow, had a peculiarity that made it unique and, at the same time, fearful. Almost everyone who was born there, at some point in their lives, found themselves inexplicably tied to this piece of land. Something seemed invisibly secure there, like deep roots that intertwined, preventing anyone from escaping. The people did not know exactly what kept them in the town, but somehow, everyone seemed to accept that something powerful tied them to Pine Hollow, like an invisible shadow that prevented them from escaping. It was autumn when David Collins arrived in town. The leaves fell in slow spirals along the deserted streets, with a light breeze that made them dance. The fog hung thick at dawn, and it seemed like it would never quite lift, as if the town itself were shrouded in a veil of mystery that could not be pierced. Inside an old mansion at the end of Main Street, a dim light flickered constantly in the attic window, like an unsettling sign, even though no one had lived there for decades. This mansion, which seemed abandoned to everyone, was immersed in a profound silence, but it also carried a secret. No one knew for sure what went on within its walls, and few dared to talk about it. David Collins was a writer who, after a series of mediocre novels, felt that his creativity had faded. He needed a quiet place, away from the distractions of the modern world, to find his creative voice again. Pine Hollow seemed to be the perfect refuge. The old mansion, for sale at a ridiculously low price, caught his eye. A real bargain, he thought, ignoring the worried looks and whispers of the locals who met him at the local market. Everyone seemed to have something to say, but nothing clear enough to make him stop. David moved in quickly, taking only a few books and his old gramophone for company. On his first night, while exploring the attic for more inspiration, he found a dusty box, forgotten under a pile of rags. Inside the box were old diaries of a girl named Evelyn, who had lived in the house during the 1920s. At first, the pages were nothing more than the banal accounts of a young woman from a small town, but as he read on, Evelyn's writings began to change. She began to report strange and disturbing events, sounds of footsteps echoing upstairs at night, laughter that seemed to come from empty spaces, and finally visions of a figure with black eyes that watched her from the dark corner of the room, night after night. David, intrigued by the young woman's writing, began to feel something very similar in his own experience. He began to hear footsteps that weren't there and felt an invisible presence constantly watching him, even when he was alone in the house. What had initially seemed like mere curiosity about Evelyn's story soon turned into something much deeper and more disturbing. During the second week of his stay, David went down to the basement and made an even more alarming discovery. A mysterious symbol drawn on the floor, formed by a circle of salt. Unlit candles were arranged at specific points around the circle. The symbol resembled one of the drawings Evelyn mentioned in her diary. She had spoken of the circle as an attempt at protection, a way to keep something bad away. But what that something really was, no one knew. David's curiosity soon turned into obsession. He began to delve deeper into the mansion's past and discovered something sinister. Since 1903, all of the house's residents had mysteriously disappeared. When he asked the residents of Pine Hollow about the mansion's history, they all avoided the subject, exchanging nervous glances, but none of them dared to give him a straight answer. This morbid silence only increased his determination to find out what was really going on there. That night, as he reread Evelyn's diary, David noticed something he had not noticed before, a final page, hastily scribbled, with a clear and direct message. If you are reading this, never, ever break the circle. But, as expected, David ignored the warning. With his mind filled with curiosity and the thirst to find out what was behind the whole story, he decided to break the circle. The sound of salt being broken echoed through the house, like a silent thunderclap, and although nothing happened immediately, the environment around him began to change. The temperature in the house dropped abruptly, and a feeling of suffocation filled the air. Something was there, waiting for the right moment to manifest itself. That same night, while David was trying to rest, a strange sound coming from the attic woke him up. With a flickering flashlight, he went upstairs. When he entered the attic, he found the gramophone playing a dark and disturbing melody, although he had not turned it on. In a dark corner of the room, a shadow moved slowly. The figure was tall and distorted, with contours that extended outward, as if it were made of pure darkness. When it turned to him, its eyes, black and deep, seemed to pull him into an endless abyss. He ran to his room and locked the door, but the feeling of being watched did not diminish. When he looked in the mirror, he saw things that he could not see directly. Indistinct figures moving behind him, and the shadows stretching out, growing thicker and more threatening each night. David soon realized that the only way to put an end to what he had unleashed was to restore the circle. But to his dismay, the original salt had disappeared, and the materials available in the city did not seem to work. He discovered that Evelyn had also tried to restore the circle, but without success. She had reached a point where she could go no further. What she could not complete was a sacrifice, something more, something she never directly wrote. Each night, the shadow manifested itself more frequently, whispering words that David did not understand, but that seemed to feed on his fear. Objects moved on their own. The walls of the house seemed to pulse as if they were alive. The situation was becoming unbearable. Desperate, he decided that he would do whatever it took to put an end to it all. At the end of Evelyn's diary, there was a paragraph that he had not deciphered before. Using an ultraviolet lamp he found in the basement, he was able to reveal the full text. The house demands blood to keep the silence. Only then will the circle be complete. David was torn between what was morally right and his own survival. The shadow seemed to feed on his fear, and with each passing moment, it became more concrete, more real. On his last night, while in the attic, he found a small mirror that had belonged to Evelyn. As he held it, he had visions of her life before she disappeared. He saw Evelyn surrounded by the shadow, screaming as she disappeared into the void. The final decision came in a moment of desperation. David offered what he thought would be enough to satisfy the curse: his own sanity. He broke the mirror, scattered the pieces around the incomplete circle, and cut his palm, letting the blood fill the empty spaces. The house shook, the walls pulsed, and the shadow let out a deafening scream before disappearing. The silence that followed was profound, a suffocating silence, almost deafening. David passed out. When he woke up, the circle was finally complete. The presence was gone, but something was wrong. He realized that the world outside the house was strange, different. Pine Hollow seemed empty, frozen in time, like a photograph, a prison where time stood still. David was trapped. The house had taken him, just as it had taken all the others before him. The light in the attic kept flickering, patiently waiting for the next curious visitor who dared to break the circle again.